Right now, it's time for Becoming Gift with Andrew Reinhart, who always gets his pronunciations correct.
Good morning, Pat, Dave, and Ron. This week, I want to finish our series looking at Pope Leo's encyclical Magnificat Humanitas and ask the question, how do we remain human while using AI? And we're going to look at the last few chapters in conclusion this week. Pope Leo quotes Pope Francis in this concept called the technocratic paradigm. He says in his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis denounced the growing dominance of a technocratic paradigm in our globalized world, the tendency to let the logic of efficiency, control, and profit alone shape personal, societal, and economic decisions. So this technocratic paradigm that he's talking about here really focuses on efficiency and the idea that everything's just about making money, about getting more done. So it's important. This isn't just a structural critique, but it's a personal one. Every time we as an individual choose the most efficient thing, sometimes we're not always choosing the most human path. You know, things like a quick generated response over giving somebody a handwritten note, or using an AI summarized document over having a real conversation with somebody. If we're doing these sorts of things where we're using AI, not just in a way to help us to do our job better or to get things done, but in a way to avoid people, avoid personal contact, to lose that human touch. These are ways that we might be participating in this technocratic paradigm in our daily choices. The second area we need to work on is resisting this idea of transhumanism. So we need to embrace our creaturely limits as spiritually significant. This idea of transhumanism is really interesting. It's the idea that we transcend humanity by way of technology. This would include things like uploading consciousness into a computer or installing some kind of computer hardware into the body, not just as a way to fix something that's ill or maybe help you use a computer the way you might use a mouse or a keyboard, but actually to quote unquote fix humanity as a way to make us more than human or to overcome our limitations without reference to God. What's interesting with this is when we think of Adam and Eve in the garden, human limitation was actually a gift for Adam and Eve. Even in the garden when they were with God, Adam needed Eve still, right? It was not good for man to be alone. So in his lack, Adam received the greatest gift of the creation. And Adam also became a gift to another who actually needed him. So it was Adam's very limited nature through which he received the greatest gift that God had in store for him. So Pope Leo says in paragraph 117, it is one thing to integrate technology within a human-centered relational vision. It is quite another to be guided by an outlook that devalues human limits and promises a purely technical form of salvation. So one of the modes of this technocratic paradigm is this idea that we can overcome all human ills and all human weaknesses by way of technology. So we need to apply this to ourselves, and we need to not try to transcend or mask our humanity, but we need to seek God and others through our vulnerability, not around it, not using AI as a way to avoid ever having to tell anyone about our problems, or avoid having to be vulnerable or asking someone for help or truly needing someone else. Because it's in letting somebody else know that we need them, that we allow them to be a gift to us, but we also become a gift to them. The same way that Adam and Eve, although, they didn't sin in the garden before the fall, but they still needed one another. And in that lack, in that need, it was the greatest gift that they received, one for the other, back and forth in their reciprocal gift of love. So the final thing I want to talk about is from the conclusion that Pope Leo talks about rooting our engagement with AI in a eucharistic spirituality, not just in kind of an efficient self-improvement. So this final directive, I think, that we can pull out from the encyclical is not a behavioral rule, but more of a spiritual posture. To use AI from a center of Eucharistic communion rather than from a place of self-optimization. So the person needs to be anchored in the Eucharist, which is the self-giving love of the incarnate Word, in the flesh given to us so that we can receive him, but also live with Christ and then give Christ to others. So we need to move forward with a conviction that we'll use AI differently when receiving the Eucharist than the person who isn't, who just sees it as a reference point for productivity, status, or power. In paragraph 234, Pope Leo says, the spirituality we need is a Eucharistic spirituality. That is a spirituality of ecclesial unity and love. Hopefully, as we're going through this, you're noticing this theme, unity in love, that we're more than just an economic being, that we're more than just a productivity being, we're more than the sum of what we accomplish, or more than the sum of the money that we can accumulate, or the power that we have, or the amount that we get done. We're the sum, as Pope St. John Paul II was famously quoted, we're the sum of the Father's love for us. So if I would summarize this whole encyclical and the message that Pope Leo is giving to us, it's really humanity. We need to stay human, both by using Christ as our model and living Christ's life here, that imitation of Christ that we're all called to, but also the transcendentals. Throughout this whole encyclical, we find unity, the unity with God, with one another, unity with God's creation, with his design, truth, the honest search for truth, goodness. We need to use AI in a way to become the person we're called to be and to be good in loving one another. And then finally, beauty, that in our humanity, in our relational unity, in our search for truth, and in the goodness of our love, we really live the beauty that will show God to the world around us.
Oh, man. Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.